Hey everybody, I know it's been a while since my last deck profile, so I'm going to get back on track with that, starting with this one, based around Giratina VSTAR from Lost Origin. I've been having fun testing this deck recently, so I thought I'd share it with you. Let's kick it off with the main attacker of the deck, Giratina VSTAR. So, I've got two of Giratina V and two Giratina VSTAR. Starting with the V, Giratina V is a 220 hit point dragon type Pokemon. Being a dragon type, it has no weakness, though it also takes two different types of energy to use its attacks. And what are the attacks on Giratina V? Well, the first one on Giratina V is Abyss Seeking, which allows you to look at the top 4 cards of your deck, put 2 into your hand, the others in the Lost Zone. It's a nice little setup attack for Giratina VSTAR, though this deck has plenty of other ways to get cards in the Lost Zone, so it's more useful only if Giratina V happens to be your active Pokemon at the time. The other attack on Giratina V is Shred. 1 Grass, 1 Psychic, 1 Colorless for 160 damage, and the attack is not affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So things like abilities or effects that your opponent's active Pokemon places on them by attacks, this Shred will get around those. The real attraction is, of course, Giratina VSTAR. 2 of those as well. This one has 280 hit points, and its main attack is Lost Impact. For the same cost as Giratina V Shred, you're doing 280 damage. Yes, this is enough to take out pretty much any Pokemon V or any Pokemon VSTAR in one hit. It does have a drawback, though. You put 2 energy attached to your Pokemon in the Lost Zone. But this isn't a bad thing, considering it will help you set up for the second attack, which I will get into in a moment. The other thing I want to say about Lost Impact's attack is that, based on how this is worded, you don't have to have both energy come from Giratina VSTAR that you're attacking with. It just requires 2 energy attached to your Pokemon, so all of them in play, to go into the Lost Zone. So you can detach them from something else if you need to. But getting into that VSTAR power, what is it? Well, it's Star Requiem. For 1 Grass, 1 Psychic, you can only use this attack if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone. But what happens if you do? Well, your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out. Doesn't get more simple than that. So, since it is a VSTAR power, you can only use 1 VSTAR power in a game, so it's best to save this attack for when you can get the most bang for your buck. So, for example, if your opponent's playing a Pokemon VMAX, you want to bring it into the active somehow, use Star Requiem to knock it out, take an easy 3 prizes. That's just one way to get the most out of it. Another way to use this is to save it for the Pokemon that's giving you the most trouble and just take it out right then and there. Now, Giratina isn't the only attacking Pokemon in this deck. We've also got 2 copies of Sableye, also from Lost Origin. Now, the main attraction here is its Lost My Attack for 1 Psychic Energy. Similar to Giratina VSTAR's VSTAR power, you can only use its attack if you have 10 or more cards in the Lost Zone. But if you do, you get to put 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. This is a great way to get multiple knockouts on smaller Pokemon, so you can take multiple prizes in a turn. So, for example, if they have something like some Sobbles on their bench, this can easily take out 2 of them and you can get some easy prizes that way. The other attacking Pokemon, 2 copies of Cramorant, also from Lost Origin. At first glance, it doesn't look like a spectacular Pokemon, its only attack is Spit Innocently. It costs 2 water and a colorless for 110 damage, and it's not even affected by weakness, so you can't even use this to take out any Pokemon that may be weak to water. The real kicker, though, is in the ability, Lost Provisions. It says if you have 4 or more cards in the Lost Zone, you get to ignore all energy in this Pokemon's attack costs. This is a nice Pokemon to have early on in the game when you have few cards in the Lost Zone. You can start spitting with this Pokemon to get some early damage in. So I've talked about the Lost Zone quite a bit. How do we get cards into the Lost Zone? Well, that's where this Pokemon comes in. 4 copies of Comfey from Lost Origin. Its ability is Flower Selecting, where once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you get to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. One goes into your hand, and the other goes into the Lost Zone. So not only are you filling your hand, you're also filling up the Lost Zone for future plays, and even though you can only use it on one Comfey once per turn, what you can do is cycle the multiple Comfeys in and out of the active to get multiple uses out of to use their abilities multiple times in a turn. And for the rest of the Pokemon, this is just one copy. I've got Lumineon V. Its luminous sign allows you to find a supporter when you put it down onto your bench. And so this can help you grab some of the other supporters. Main one is Colress's Experiment, which I'll get into in a bit. But there are a couple of other supporters in there that you may want to grab in case you need them. Radiant Greninja, of course, is in here. It's easily the best Radiant Pokemon out there, mainly for its ability Concealed Cards. You discard an energy, you draw 2 cards, pretty simple. Occasionally, you may want to use its Moonlight Shuriken to deal 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, which can come in handy and get you some knockouts, but really it's mainly about concealed cards. Also have a Galarian Zigzagoon. You can play it on your bench, and you get to put a damage counter onto something. This allows you to help you get some knockouts that are just out of reach, where you just need 10 more damage to finish the job. And better yet, you can also use Scoop Up Net to take him back off your bench, put him back down again, put another damage counter. Pretty nice. Speaking of the bench, we've also got a Manaphy of our own. Basically, when it's on you get to prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon. When it's in play, this is very nice to have, as a lot of the Pokemon that are meant to sit on the bench have fairly low hit points, like Comfey here. Manaphy will help protect him. And that about does it for the Pokemon on this deck. Let's get into the supporters. There aren't many, but there is one important supporter that I want to talk about, and that's Colress's Experiment. We run 4 of them, and what it allows you to do is you get to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put 3 of them into your hand, and the other 2 into the Lost Zone. This is another way of getting more cards. You get some nice card selection, and you get to put cards to the Lost Zone for your supporter. So it's really the main drawing supporter we've got in here. The other supporters, 2 Boss's Orders. As I've said in many other deck profiles, games are won or lost by your use of Boss's Orders, so it's good to have some in your deck. Final supporter is 1 copy of Roxanne. And what this card does is your opponent has to have 3 or fewer prize cards remaining to use it. But when you can use it, each player shuffles their hand to their deck, you draw 6 cards, and your opponent draws 2 cards. So this is a nice way to mess with your opponent's hand later in the game. Now we move on to the item cards. One of the more important ones for your early turns is Battle VIP Pass. Now, you can only use this card during your first turn, but when you do get to use it, you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon and put them onto your bench. It's a nice way to get multiple Comfeys onto the field in the early turns. Well, only on the first turn, but Even if you draw it later in the if you're able to get if you draw it later in the game, it's nice for discard fodder, or it also makes it an easy choice to put in the Lost Zone for the late if you draw it in the later turns in those moments. Speaking of the Lost Zone, 4 copies of Mirage Gate. Now, the one awkward thing about Giratina VSTAR is the attack cost. It needs 2 different types of energy. Well, Mirage Gate helps solve that problem. It requires us to have 7 or more cards in the Lost Zone, but when you do, you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energies of different types and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. And it doesn't matter if they're on the bench or in the active, or they don't both have to be attached to one Pokemon specifically. So this is a great way to get Giratina V powered up in a single turn, once you have the cards in the Lost Zone to do so. One other we've got 4 copies of Scoop Up Net. You get to pick up one of your Pokemon that isn't a Pokemon V or Pokemon GX. So this is a great way to pick up your Comfey that's in the active, move another Comfey in, put it back down, so to get more uses out of your flower selecting. And I also mentioned Zigzagoon earlier as well. That's a way to pick that up. I've also got 3 copies of Escape Rope. Each player switches their active Pokemon one with their bench Pokemon. So this is another way of cycling your Comfeys around to get multiple uses out of their ability. Some 2-ofs now. We got 2 copies of Quick Ball. You discard a card from your hand to find a basic Pokemon to put in your hand. Always good to have. 2 copies of Ordinary Rod. This allows you to shuffle up to 2 Pokemon and 2 basic energies from your discard pile into your deck. It's nice to get some cards back into your deck for later reuse. After all, you're ending up lost zoning some cards away in the early turn, so this is a way to help you recover a bit. 1 copy of Switch. Much like Escape Rope, it's used to cycle Pokemon in and out of the active. It helps with retreating. Lost Vacuum. This is one other way you can put a card in the Lost Zone, but it also allows you to choose a Pokemon. But when you play it, you get to choose a Pokemon tool attached to any Pokemon or a stadium in play to put in the Lost Zone as well. So not only can this get rid of some of your opponent's cards, but you can also use this on your own Pokemon tools and stadiums to get them into the Lost Zone and fill up that count that much quicker. We've got 1 of those Lost Vacuums in the deck. Only tool in the deck is 2 copies of Air Balloon. It enables your Comfey to retreat for free if you need to, so you can cycle them around a bit more easily. Finally, the stadiums. I run 2 different kinds. One of the main ones is Path to the Peak. Now, Comfey is a great Pokemon to have for its ability, but there is one way that shuts it down, and that would be Empoleon V from the Battle Style set. It has an ability that when it's active, your basic Pokemon that don't have a rule box will lose all their abilities. This is a way to easily turn that off. And also to turn off any other Pokemon V's abilities that may give you some trouble. And the final stadium is 1 copy of Training Court. This is a way that once per turn you may return a basic energy card from your discard pile to your hand. It's another great recovery card. Finally, the energy. There's 5 copies of Psychic Energy, 3 copies of Grass Energy, and 3 copies of Water Energy. The Water Energy is really only useful for Radiant Greninja if we want to attack with him, so that's why there's only a few of them. And there's more Psychic than the other 2 types because not only does Giratina need it, but Sableye uses it as well. So that's why there's a bit of an imbalance there. And that about does it for this deck profile. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and a comment. And be sure to subscribe as well so you don't miss another episode. I will see you guys next time, and remember, good luck, have fun, and keep well.